Have you ever made a small mistake and watched it turn into a much bigger problem than you expected? Yeah, you're not alone. We all mess up sometimes. That's just being human. But every now and then, a tiny error, just a slip of the finger or forgetting something small, can lead to absolute disaster. And guess what? It happens more often than you'd think all around the world. Compared to those, your mistake might actually be nothing at all. So don't worry too much. Today, we're diving into 7 shocking stories of simple human errors that led to huge consequences. Let's get started. Number 1, the massive power outage in New York City. $3.3 billion in damage. For the first tragedy, we're talking about one of the most shocking power outages in history. Let's go back to 1977, when New York City was hit by a massive blackout, causing an unbelievable $3.3 billion in damage. How did this happen? Well, it all came down to one simple mistake. The blackout happened in New York City and the surrounding areas, starting around 9 p.m., which meant the whole city was plunged into darkness. Imagine that. One moment, everything is normal, and the next, you can't see anything. But that's not all. When the lights went out, crime rates soared. People took advantage of the darkness and started looting stores, while others who couldn't handle the heat anymore joined in on violent riots. In a matter of hours, New York had turned into a crime city. The damage was insane. A total of 1,616 stores were looted, 37 fires broke out in the city, and more than 3,700 people were arrested. Furthermore, 2 airports were shut down for about 8 hours, and car tunnels were also closed, and 4,000 people needing to be evacuated from the subway because of the heat and lack of power. The blackout lasted for about 10 hours, and in that time, it felt like everything had come to a standstill. Even one murder happened during the blackout, and to this day, the case remains unsolved. So, how did this disaster start? It wasn't due to a big natural disaster like many people think. It all came down to human error, a simple mistake that led to a huge catastrophe. At a power station, 3 lightning strikes hit the facility. These strikes caused extra electrical flow that put too much stress on the system. To try and prevent a shutdown, the facility workers had to manually switch off certain things to balance the load. But here's the thing. These switches had to be pressed in the correct order. Unfortunately, the worker made one tiny mistake, and that was all it took for the entire system to shut down. Can you believe that? One mistake caused all this chaos. And to make matters worse, this blackout happened right when New York was already on edge, dealing with the son of Sam serial killer case. People were already scared and on high alert, and the blackout only made things worse. Imagine being the person who made that mistake. That must have been one stressful night. Number 2, let's talk about a crazy story that happened in Japan, where a teacher made a simple mistake that cost the school nearly $2,000. This happened at Mikazuki Elementary School in Kochi City, Japan. It all started on July 14th, when a teacher began filling the school's outdoor swimming pool in preparation for a swimming lesson. Classic summer vibes, right? But unfortunately, the weather turned bad, and the swimming lesson had to be canceled. Now, here's where the mistake happened. The swimming class has been canceled due to bad weather, and the teacher forgot to turn off the water after school. This was the start of the disaster. The next week, another teacher finally noticed that the water had been left running for days and turned it off. The water had been running nonstop for 7 days. And then the unexpected phone call came. It was from the sewer company, and they were asking why the sewer bill was so unusually high. The school had a $2,000 sewer bill for July. To put that in perspective, the usual sewer bill is only around $180. So this was a huge jump. It turned out that the teacher had accidentally left the pool's water running for a whole week, which led to an extra $1,800 in costs. It's estimated that this mistake wasted the equivalent of 15 full pools of water. The school board started considering whether to ask the teacher to pay for the loss. Imagine being asked to pay $2,000 for a mistake. Some people felt the teacher should be held responsible for the mistake, while others thought the school system and management should also share some blame. Under Japan's labor laws, it's not easy to make an employee pay for such a large amount. While there may be consequences for the mistake, directly asking the teacher to pay is likely against the law. Next, we're going to talk about a tragic event caused by a simple mistake that turned into a massive disaster. It's the Aeroflot Flight 593 crash. This happened in 1994 when a Russian airline's medium-sized jet, Aeroflot Flight 593, took off from Moscow with 12 crew members and 63 passengers, totaling 75 people on board. The plane was headed to Hong Kong, and everything seemed perfectly normal. But things went horribly wrong. After takeoff, the flight was cruising over Siberia when suddenly, without any emergency signals, the plane lost contact. The next day, the wreckage was found in the mountains of southern Siberia, and it was confirmed that there were no survivors. But here's where things get really strange. When investigators found the cockpit, they discovered the body of a child. The question is, how did a child get into the cockpit? Did they sneak in? No, this child wasn't a stowaway. He was invited into the cockpit. It turns out that the child was the pilot's son, and during the flight, he was allowed to sit in the pilot's seat and even play with the controls. The pilot thought that since the plane was on autopilot, it would correct any mistakes made by the child. Back in the day, it was easier to let passengers into the cockpit, but the fact that this pilot allowed his child to handle the controls is just shocking. And guess what? The child accidentally input a hidden command that disengaged part of the autopilot. This caused the plane to slowly tilt, starting the chain of events that led to the crash. The worst part? The airline never disclosed this hidden command to the pilots. Because of this, both pilots didn't recognize the issue when things started to go wrong. The first person to notice the problem was the child, who tried to tell the pilots that the plane was tilting. But since the pilots didn't know about the hidden command, they just thought it was a small error caused by the child playing with the controls. Eventually, the plane began to dive. The pilots couldn't regain control, and during the rapid descent, there were even strong G-forces that pushed the pilots out of their seats. For a while, the child was still holding the controls. One of the pilots finally managed to stop the descent for a brief moment, but the plane then started spiraling again. When the captain took control, he mistakenly pulled the nose up too much, which caused the plane to stall and lose lift. The plane crashed into the mountains. The investigation later revealed that if the pilots had simply kept their hands off the controls, the autopilot would have prevented the stall and the crash could have been avoided. This crash was caused by a lack of awareness. The pilot's morally questionable decision to let his child touch the controls, the failure to communicate important commands, and multiple small mistakes. It's hard to even call this a simple mistake. These were critical errors. This is a tragic story where multiple errors stacked up, leading to an avoidable disaster. If only the recovery had been faster, or if the child hadn't been allowed to play with the controls, maybe this could have been avoided. Have you ever heard of a simple typo causing total disaster? Well, let me tell you a wild story that actually happened in the UK. There's this government-backed organization called Companies House. Their job is to keep official records about every company in the country, like who owns what, how the business is doing, and more. Investors and business partners often check this info to decide if a company is trustworthy. Now, because it's linked to the government, people really trust it. But in February 2009, Companies House made a huge mistake. They posted a report saying that a company called Taylor & Sons had gone bankrupt. Sound bad already, right? But here's the thing. Taylor & Sons was a successful engineering company with over 250 employees and a history of more than 120 years. They were doing just fine. Still, once the report went public, all hell broke loose. Partners and investors panicked. Some started pulling out their contracts. The company's stock value dropped like crazy. People were calling the owner nonstop, trying to confirm the news, but they couldn't reach him. Why? Because the owner was on vacation in the Maldives. Yep, totally unaware of the chaos happening back home. Turns out, Taylor and Sons wasn't bankrupt at all. The actual company that had gone out of business was a completely different one, called Taylor and Son, without the S at the end. That's right, a single letter. One tiny S at the end of the name caused a total disaster. Company's house had simply made a typo. 3 days later, they noticed the mistake and fixed the report, but by then, the damage was already done. Taylor and Sons lost deals worth millions. Projects worth around £2.5 million were canceled. Monthly transactions of nearly £350,000 vanished, all because of that one typo. Of course, Taylor and Sons didn't just sit back and take it. They sued Company's house, and rightfully so. The court ruled in their favor and ordered Company's house to pay damages. How much? Well, the exact amount isn't public, but legal experts estimated the claim at £8.8 million. Just imagine, a billion-dollar disaster, all because of a single misplaced S. Let me tell you about one of the biggest data leak disasters in history, caused by nothing more than a simple, unbelievable mistake. The company behind it? A US-based marketing and data firm called Exactis, based in Florida. Now, Exactis wasn't just any small company. They had tons of data on American citizens. And I mean detailed stuff, names, addresses, phone numbers, gender, family members, religion, hobbies, you name it. With that much sensitive information, you'd think their data would be locked up tight, right? Well, think again. In June 2018, shocking news broke. Over 340 million personal records had been leaked. That's right, 230 million records of everyday consumers and 110 million records for businesses. All just out there. So what happened? Here's the crazy part. All that important personal data was stored on a public server. No password, no protection, nothing. Yeah, you heard that right. Anyone with internet access could just walk right in. You could literally search someone's name and boom, their data would pop up. It was like a personal info free-for-all, a privacy clearance sale, but nobody signed up for it. No doors, no locks, just everything wide open, totally exposed. Luckily, a cybersecurity expert discovered the issue by chance and immediately alerted Exactis and the FBI. Only then did the company finally shut down access and put up basic security. But here's the scary part. No one knows who accessed the data or how much was copied during the time it was open. And if that information was used for scams or identity theft, the consequences will be massive. If even half of the affected people sued, the damages could be hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe more. This wasn't just a small mistake. It was one of the largest data leaks ever, and all because someone stored private data on a public server. All right, here's another jaw-dropping story of a simple mistake that led to massive financial damage. This one's known as the JCOM stock order blunder. But fun fact, the company that made the mistake wasn't JCOM. It was actually Mizuho Securities, one of Japan's biggest brokerage firms. So what happened? On December 8, 2005, JCOM stock price suddenly crashed hard. Investors went into panic mode. Some thought, wow, what a deal, and started buying tons of shares. Others freaked out, thinking they were about to lose big, and sold all their stocks. The market turned into total chaos. And a reason? One Mizuho Securities employee, just one person, made a huge input error. They meant to sell one share for 610,000 yen, but instead entered an order to sell 610,000 shares for just 1 yen each. The system did give a warning about the order being weird, but the employee ignored it, thinking it was the usual false alarm. Spoiler, it wasn't. The super cheap stocks hit the market, and everyone jumped on them. About 1 minute and 25 seconds later, Mizuho realized the mistake and tried to cancel the order. But it was too late. The Tokyo Stock Exchange's system wouldn't allow the cancellation. Even after Tokyo Stock Exchange staff called to ask, "Hey, was this a mistake?" the trade couldn't be undone. By then, more and more people were selling off shares, thinking the stock was crashing for real. The price kept falling until it hit the daily trading limit, called limit down in Japan. Mizuho asked the exchange to halt trading, but the request was denied to avoid legal risk. The losses got worse. With no way to cancel, Mizuho tried a desperate move called a reverse trade. That means they tried to buy back the same amount of shares before the official settlement date to minimize the damage. But here's the problem. So many people were placing orders to buy those cheap shares, and Mizuho couldn't catch up. In the end, 96,236 shares were officially sold, which was more than the total number of shares that actually existed. So what now? They couldn't deliver shares that didn't exist, and they couldn't cancel the trades either. The Japan Securities Clearing Corporation stepped in and forced cash settlements. That means Mizuho had to buy back the shares from investors based on a reference price, yen 912,000 per share. And that's how Mizuho Securities ended up losing about 40.7 billion yen, which is over 300 million US dollars. Their entire annual profit gone in a flash. Some investors made a huge profit from the mistake. Mizuho sued the Tokyo Stock Exchange, saying the system was faulty and that trading should have been paused. The court agreed partly, and the exchange was ordered to pay Mizuho about 10.7 billion yen, around 100 million US dollars. So in the end, yes, the employee made the mistake. But the system and the exchange's response also made things worse. All right, for our final story today, let's talk about how a simple mistake ended an entire empire. Yep, you heard that right. The fall of a powerful empire, all because someone forgot to lock a door. Let me explain. We're talking about the Byzantine Empire, also known as the Eastern Roman Empire. Back in the 15th century, they were in constant conflict with the rising Ottoman Empire. Now, in the year 1453, the Ottomans launched a major attack on the Byzantine capital, Constantinople. At first glance, this just sounds like a regular war where one side lost. But here's the twist. Constantinople was known as one of the strongest fortress cities in the world. It was surrounded by massive stone walls, considered nearly impossible to break through. In fact, many believed the city was unbeatable, a true stronghold. So how did it fall? Here's where it gets unbelievable. On the day of the attack, a Byzantine soldier forgot to lock one of the city gates. That's right, one unlocked gate in a city surrounded by unbeatable walls. The Ottoman soldiers noticed it, and about 300 troops slipped through the open gate. Once they were inside, chaos broke out. The Byzantine defenders fought back with everything they had, but it was too late. The city was overrun. And just like that, the Byzantine Empire, over 1,000 years of history, came to an end. If that one gate had been locked, maybe the Ottomans would have failed. Maybe history would have taken a completely different turn. It's crazy to think about, right? No matter how strong your defenses are, if you leave the door open, it's all useless. The fall of a mighty empire, all because someone forgot to turn the key. And that wraps up our list of 6 small mistakes that led to massive disasters. It's kind of shocking, isn't it? The damages, the chaos, all caused by simple human errors. Sometimes it's not hackers or villains, but just a little typo or someone forgetting a lock. These stories really show us how even tiny mistakes can lead to huge consequences. Makes my own mistakes feel a lot smaller. Still, it's a good reminder. We should all try to be more careful. Because hey, Everyone makes mistakes, but what matters is not repeating them. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. See you next time.